So I'm going to walk you through a couple of key things to understand. Concept, coverage, and calendar. And yeah, I tried to make them all C's. So when we start with the concept, this is a lot of the data that Parker had addressed earlier. What data are we considering? How are we looking at these values? Are we considering real versus nominal? Are we looking at growth rates or levels? What alternative assumptions do we want to consider? Because exactly as Parker said earlier, they're going to build in assumptions and opinions into their analysis. And as economics is done, you have to assume some relationships, look at some of the information behind it. The clearer you can define your concept and your information when you request to the CBO, the clearer they will be when they're going to respond to you, because they have to address your questions. So ultimately, what question are we looking at? That's your concept, and how clearly can you explain that to walk it through? Now let's talk about the coverage. Are we looking at this data nationally, regionally, down to a city? Are we looking at the impact to households' choices? Are we looking at individual choices? What's going to be the effect here and how we look at this? EV subsidies and everything else. Well, what are we looking at? We need to understand who's in the market to buy a new car. If you're going to buy a new car, are you going to consider an EV? People in urban areas might have access to charging station. In rural areas, not so much. Is this credit going to be enough to offset this potential higher cost for the car versus continued maintenance? And how long is this program going to run? These are all reasonable questions to examine, look at as you begin to draft your letter. So again, what is our clear question that we're trying to look at? What is going to be the impact? Who is going to be affected? Where is this going to take place? And what is the time period, the calendar, how this is going to run out? Instead of C's, I use T's. So with your data standards, trusted official sources. There's a reason Parker took us to the CBO website. There's a reason we referenced Fred. We're not pulling this data from Twitter, X, or TikTok. When you're referencing the information, you want to make sure you're pulling from a trusted government source so that the information can be clearly referenced and understood. Timely data. Why do we want to make sure that the data that we're using is going to be clear? We understand the timeline where the information was pulled from. How many people are aware of what's called revisions to economic data? All right, not everyone, but a lot. When data is put out, there has to be a balance between the speed in which the data is put out there, because people need this information to make choices, make policy decisions, move forward. So there's that balance between speed and accuracy as the information comes out. The GDP numbers are going to be released, what's called their advanced estimate, or their first estimate, is going to be released in about 3 weeks on February 20th. From there, the second revision will release about 3 weeks after that on March 13th. And then you get their third estimate on March 26th. Notice how I'm not using the word final. Data can be revised, and as more information comes forward, there's more ability to accurately assess what that data is. Even when the third estimate comes in, you've only got about 75 to about 85% of the available data to make that third estimate. This information continues to come in and help people to better understand. Now, with the data that the United States puts out, that advanced estimate, that second estimate, these are the best possible point estimates that we can put together at that time, given that the data we have. So when you're talking about timely data, you really want to be mindful of the information, when was this data pulled out, and how revisions can impact this, especially during points of huge swings. During COVID, when things shut down, there was a huge negative swing for the GDP revision. That's not because the first estimate was wrong. It's because the first estimate helped start to paint the picture, but unfortunately, as more data came in, that picture looked a little bit more negative and bleak than it originally did. So you want to be mindful of the data you're referencing and when this data is being pulled. As I mentioned, transparent methods. You want to be very clear on what you're asking of CBO so that the CBO is going to be very clear in your response. They do bury information in footnotes. You don't want it to be just trust me. You want to provide a clear information to them and push them on responses. One of the things we talked about last week was the draft response that they're going to get to you. Take time to review that. The goal here is for you to think critically and how you can write questions and get back to them of that information. Now, the next thing I say is trackable, downloadable, and replicable results. So with this, again, any number that they pull should be a number that you're able to understand where it came from. Again, if I go back and my friend said, I'll pick you up lunch, he grabs me a sandwich and he comes back and he says it's $50. Like, hey man, I jumped on the website real quick. Shows that sandwich like 16 bucks. Maybe with tax and a little tip on there, we're talking 20, but where did you get 50 from? So it's a case of making sure that the data you're looking at is something that can be tracked, understood, and you can go back to it. And again, any data that you can provide in your letter to the CBO is going to be useful because it's going to help push them as far as that answer. And finally, if you can pull from trusted sources, making sure you know where your data is coming from, the methods are transparent, and everything can be downloaded and replicable, your results should be trustworthy and defended. And this is going to be a case of when the CBO presents the data to you, they should be able to make sure that everything is trustworthy and defendable. And that way, when you go to the member, you're able to defend the response that you've gotten. And you can be like, this is the best information that we have at the time to provide the best score possible.